Hi, I'm back with the third set of videos for Goal 2 concerning religion and reform. The early 1800s marked a time of significant reform for this country. This period between the Revolution and the Civil War brought new challenges, including cultural and political divisions and disagreements. People responded to the chaos and uncertainty by organizing into reform groups. The era was so charged with activism, it was called the Age of Reform. So here we go. In this presentation, we're talking about religion and reform, and this takes up all of chapter 4 in your book. The objectives for this presentation are Goal 2, Objective 5, identify and evaluate the major reform movements, and Objective 6, evaluate the role of religion on social issues such as slavery. We'll also go back to Goal 1, looking at the second objective, analyze the freedoms available to women before 1820. Our essential questions are, how did the Second Great Awakening affect life in the United States? What were the main features of public school, penitentiary, and temperance reform movements? How did reformers try to help enslaved people? And what steps did American women take to advance their rights in the mid-1800s? So we'll start with religion in the early 1800s. The Second Great Awakening was a revival of religious feeling in the early 1800s. It was developed because there was a large portion of the population that felt that America had gone bad, that we needed to improve American morals. The preachers who traveled around preaching to people were known as revivalists. One of these revivalists was Charles Grandison Finney. He was known as the father of revivalism, and he used evangelical speeches using strong emotions to reach people. These speeches were called hellfire and brimstone sermons. Another important character in this time is Joseph Smith. He is the founder of the Mormon religion, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and members of this church frequently faced persecution in the history of our country. They start in New York and are forced west until eventually they end up settling in Utah. Another group of people are those who are looking to form utopian communities. Utopian means perfect or heavenly, ideal. These communities sought to share property, work, and family life. They were communal. Some examples of these communities were Brooks Farm, New Harmony, and Oneida. We've talked about transcendentalism already when we talked about nationalism, but this is the belief that humans could transcend their senses in order to learn. Individuals should listen to nature and their own consciousness to learn truths. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a transcendentalist. He was poet and author. He supported abolition and slavery and also individualism. Transcendentalism was very much about individualism. Henry David Thoreau, also a transcendentalist, author and philosopher, also supported abolition of slavery. He came up with the idea of civil disobedience, peaceful refusal to obey unjust laws. Now we're going to move on to other reforms that happened in society, and these dealt with the areas of education, prisons, mental illness, and temperance. Horace Mann was a public school reformer, and he supported compulsory education, that is, education that requires attendance by law. He also supported publicly funded education. We take this for granted now, but at that time, most education was private. The government did not support education. We've talked about Noah Webster, who wrote the first American dictionary. He developed spelling forms that were unique to Americans. He spelled things differently than the British did. We've also mentioned Dorothea Dix. She was a reformer who led the fight to establish mental hospitals for the mentally ill, called for more humane treatment of the mentally ill and the imprisoned. Ironically, the hospital that was here in Raleigh is now closed. Prison reform was another area that people were interested in, and there was a movement to rehabilitate criminals, not just remove them from society, but treat them while they were imprisoned. Specifically, Auburn and Pennsylvania incorporated this idea. The Auburn prison is still very much designed around rehabilitation, especially with young criminals. In Auburn, the inmates have strict rules, but they work together during the day, and they sleep alone in separate cells during the night. In Pennsylvania, inmates repent in strict isolation, so a different approach in the Pennsylvania system. The temperance movement, of course, this is a movement that promotes the ban of alcohol, attempt to limit alcohol consumption. Temperance movement aimed to fix society's problems by limiting alcohol consumption. This is a pretty serious group of ladies in that picture. They don't mess around with alcohol. Alcohol was believed to be the source of crime, violence, poverty, and sickness.